That's the look we're going for.
Yeah, switch to hammer.
Can we all hear me at the back? Oh yes, there we are, the mic is on. Right, I think we might be about ready. I think we're just waiting for the live stream to start. I get a thumbs up from the back.
There's a live stream.
For our coffee.
You ready? We are ready. Well, welcome everyone. Welcome to Conservative Party Conference 2024, the traditional place where the Conservative Party cognoscentes kick off their conference at the London Assembly City Hall Conservatives event. This year, how we win back London. That has been a theme a couple of years running, alas. We hopefully you've seen some literature on your seats about the great work that we're doing. You can see on one side all of our cheerful smiling faces, and on the other side some of the things we've been up to. Also on your seats, I'm afraid we did slightly run out, but most of you have a little thumbs up, thumbs down thing. So if you can just do a thumbs up, thumbs down whether you found your thumbs up, thumbs down. Excellent. So this is how we spot Peter, the troublemaker, and
disenfranchise people.
this is how we spot the troublemakers. Well, welcome back, Peter. Let's just do a quick test. Do we think, under Sadiq Khan, is London a success or not a success? Let's just check how our thumbs up and thumbs down are working. This is also, having checked for troublemakers, this is how we check for Labour people who snuck into the event.
Keep them up, keep them up. Right, here you go.
Frankly, even the Labour people don't think he's doing a very good job. He's actually got an interesting problem. So he's entering his third term. He spent 2 terms as Mayor of London. Every single thing that went wrong was the fault of the government. He's now got a new government which has created for him 2 problems. Problem number 1, he can't just blame the Labour government for all of the problems of the Labour mayor. Problem number 2, just before the Labour conference, Keir Starmer told him there is no more money. No more money for housing, no more money for police, no more money for 101 mad crazy schemes that he wants money for. So now he, you might have seen, he flew off to America to lecture us on climate change. He's now back and having a rethink about how he thinks his mayoralty might work when he can't literally blame every single thing on the government. It's going to be an exciting term ahead of us to find out how he does that. Speaking of exciting things ahead of us, we have a wonderful panel here of London Assembly members. Big round of applause for the Conservative London Assembly team. We'll be going through in three sections. We have a section, first of all, on housing and regeneration of the economy, which Assemblymember Bailey, Lord Bailey of Paddington, will be leading us off on. And then secondly, Assemblymember Hall will be telling us about crime and safety. Finally, Tom, Assemblymember Torre, will be talking about transport. after each of those sections, we will be opening up for questions. But let me tell you now, this is not like Sadiq Khan's People's Question Time, where his prime objective is to squeeze the people out and have no scrutiny. So I've sort of given you a taste of what the sections are that are coming up. If you've got a question that doesn't quite easily fit into one of them, pick the one that it fits into least badly, stick your hand up and we'll accommodate you. So, and finally at the end, if there are any other questions, we'll be doing some informal mingling. And just before I go to Sean for our first section, let me also say a big thank you to Conservative Home for supporting our event, for live streaming us, not just to the huge masses of people who can barely even fit into this room, but to the billions of people, literally billions of people watching on the live stream around the world, tuning in how Conservatives are going to win back London. So on that high point, let's go over to Sean for a section on housing, planning and regeneration. Sean.
Thank you, Neil. Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon to you all. I'm going to be mercifully brief. What I'm going to say is this. In London, we have an acute housing problem. I don't need to tell that to you. But I want to point out that the Mayor has had £8.42 billion over the last 2 terms to solve this problem, and he simply hasn't delivered. Now, some of the problems we face in London are cyclical. They're to do with the market, and he has to fight them. But, of course, he constantly uses the term counter-cyclical, and he's done nothing to deliver on that. And I want to be very clear about what we're going to do as a Conservative group. We're going to be positive. We're going to push the Mayor and push the government to support the Mayor. We have 3 major areas we're going to do that in. Firstly, we're going to start with social housing. So I've just written to the Chancellor to say what she could do to help the Mayor deliver in London for Londoners with her budget. Now, if I get a reply or not, who knows? But the point being, we want to state very clearly what we believe Londoners need. We want to be known as a group who come with solutions. This isn't about whining. This is about solutions. After that, we'll move on to young people and what aspirations young people have to buy, what challenges young people face with renting, and what the government, and more pointedly the Mayor, can do about helping to solve those problems. Because he has done very little to nothing for young people who want to actually buy, and it is our belief that there's plenty he could do, even more if he was supported by the government, and we've laid those out, and the Chancellor and the Housing Minister will be receiving a letter to that state. And beyond that, we want to talk about renters. London has become a renters' town, and as Conservatives, we are very concerned about that and making sure we help young people rent. And I want to be very clear. When I say young people, I mean anybody below the age of 40. So congratulations if you're a young person. I am no longer a young person, apparently. Yeah, very big R. But the point is, that's how acute the housing problem has become in London. It is now people in their 40s who are still renting, have no idea of how they will buy. If they want to buy, that's who we want to support. And let me just circle all the way back round to the beginning. £4 billion is what the Mayor has for his current affordable housing programme. He has spent hardly any of that money. He's only delivered 8% of the homes he has to deliver with that money. He is going to fail. Politically, that would be great for us. But we are real Londoners. We don't want him to fail. We want him to deliver. Now, of course, the best way to deliver would to have a Conservative Mayor. But because we don't have one, unfortunately, we're going to have to push him very hard to make sure he delivers with the money he's been given by the government. Again, he's been given £8.42 billion and simply has not used that money properly. And we want to see if the Chancellor will give him more. But that's where we are in housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. I was just going to see if anyone has any questions. Somebody's straight up, look at this, like a forest of hands. I have one of the little yes-no questions that I'll come to in a second, but first we have 2 people with roving mics, so if one of you wants to go over here, we'll take both questions and then do them both together. So if you hold your horses a second, and then also in the far corner at the back there. Brilliant. So.
Thank you. So under the Conservative government, we changed the taxation system to make it less appealing for landlords. And now we have the Labour government who are changing regulatory rules that will make it less appealing for landlords. I'm a local councillor in Croydon. As I'm sure you all know, there's a £600 million overspend expected across London's councils. A lot of that is due to the pressures on our housing system, temporary accommodation. When the system has been turned so against private landlords, how can we hope to actually ensure that the whole system is working for young people, but also older people who are also going to be increasingly renting as well?
Thanks. Good question. And then in the back there?
Thank you. Harry Rushworth. There are a lot of low-density, sort of large council estates in London, some of which have been sold off now. I know some of the members here have drawn attention to the conditions in some of these, but is there an opportunity for resident-led estate regeneration within London to sort of help address this housing issue?
Thank you very much. Funnily enough, there's a good example of that happening in Croydon. So who would like to take those two questions? Andrew?
I'll come after Andrew.
Certainly in terms of, you've hit the nail
Let
on
me
the-
just, sorry to interrupt, Andrew.
I have to introduce myself.
You have to introduce yourself, otherwise who would know who you were?
Nobody knows who I am. Nobody knows who I am. My name is Andrew Boff, and I'm a member of the London Assembly. I chair the Planning and Regeneration Committee, and for this year I'm the chair of the London Assembly, which of course means I'm politically neutral. Why were there laughs? Hit the nail on the head with, we got to get more people back into the business of providing housing, and that's not just about building, it's about providing accommodation for people to rent. And if any of you, and I know some of you, are considering landlord licensing in London, as a lot of boroughs are, just ask yourself what on earth that stupid regime achieves, apart from to offload costs of inspection onto the landlords. It doesn't do anything, and it means landlords have to pay hundreds of pounds more a year in order to provide the accommodation that we need in London. We absolutely need. So absolutely, the government were wrong in the former government were wrong in a number of aspects. For example, the rent freeze that they proposed on social housing providers, that prevented social housing providers from then investing in new housing, but it sounded so lovely at the time that we were going to freeze rents. Rent control never works, whether or not it's under a Conservative government or in a Labour government. It's never worked anywhere in the world that has ever been tried. And we have to keep letting people know. In terms of resident-led housing, absolutely. The curious thing is that when you do ask residents about regeneration on their estates, and I fought very hard when I was housing spokesman for the mayor, who was originally against consulting with residents about estate regeneration. I said, yes, we should have tenant ballots, we should have estate ballots. It's surprising when you engage with people how pro-building they are. They are not all NIMBYs, that awful word that I hate even articulating, but they aren't. They want to see homes developed. They just want to see homes developed that they feel they have a buy-in on. So yes, resident-led housing regeneration, it works, it passes the test, and we should have more of it.
Just to quickly back that up, I'll start with resident housing. That's going to need more money from the government. Resident-led is going to be slightly expensive, and the mayor's defence has always been, where has the money come from? Where will the money come from? That's why I wrote to the government and said, you've both made a lot of noises about all the money you want, let's see you give it to the mayor. I think sometimes the mayor asks for huge sums of money as a political tactic. I think that might come back to bite him, because now that his own government will have to provide him with that money. But then resident-led regeneration is a great thing, because I think it will help regeneration in general, because it will stop people being terrified about regeneration happening in their local area. So it's actually very, very important. I won't talk about rent controls, because the only other way to destroy a city so completely would be to rerun the Blitz. Rent controls is mental. That's a quote. Please quote me on that. It's absolutely mental. When you talk about landlords, one of the things I think may be a coming positive in London is the build-to-rent sector, because we should be supporting small landlords. Most landlords in London have 1 to 3 properties. It was a bit of a family hangover, and they're using it as an income for pension often. But the scale at which we need to have rent in London means that our build-to-rent sector is probably going to have to grow. It definitely will have to grow and be a lot more active. I just want to say one last thing about temporary accommodation. London Council spend £90 million a month on temporary accommodation. That shows you the pressure we are under. Conservative, Lib Dem, Labour, whatever, somebody needs to do something about that, and that somebody is the mayor and the government. Councils cannot be expected to carry that burden on their own. Much of the drama they have was delivered to them by the government. So again, I've asked the Chancellor for more money to deal with that particular situation.
Thanks, Sean. Any more questions? I see 2 more people, 3 more people. There we are. Well, I think we have 2 mics. So if we do one at the back, one at the front, and then we'll quickly relay from the back to the front, and it will be seamless. Yes, we're starting, the lady at the back.
Nicole Richer, Chair of Hendon. How do we ensure that there's an appropriate number of family homes built in our suburbs to ensure young people aren't pushed out of their area when they want to buy their future homes?
Good question.
Claire Hambro, former London Regional Chairman. The Ebury Bridge estate I'd like to draw your attention to, and the issue of key workers accommodation. When Westminster City Council was run by a Conservative administration, the Ebury Bridge estate had a high percentage of key workers as well as social housing and private sales. The new Labour administration completely took away the key workers sector percentage. It is now all social housing. I would like to, this is a disaster for the police and the teachers that we need to live locally, and I'm asking if maybe that could be factored into your campaigning and your deliberations on the regeneration projects.
Okay, thank you.
Should we take those 2 questions, and then I've seen 2 more in the next phase?
Let me quickly start with key worker. I personally have a real passion for key worker homes, and I'll tell you why. In order to solve the housing problem in London, we need to stop talking about council housing and social housing and talk about subsidised housing, because that way we can do much more for a broader set of people. So, for instance, if you are a paramedic, you have a fairly good income, we only need to subsidise you a little bit and you can get on with it, but it means it lowers the cost of the public purse and we provide you with a home to live. If you are disabled or elderly and need a full subsidy, then it gives us more to spend on that. That's why all these small distinctions that the Mayor makes, London housing, this, that and the other, I think are red herring. We do need to focus on these things because most people with a housing need in London will not qualify for council housing. I want you to bear that in mind. That's why I try to use the word subsidised housing. Family homes. The only way that we will build more family homes is if the Mayor makes a political decision to do so. He needs to change the London plan, and he needs to change the level of subsidy that's given for a family home. He needs to incentivise family homes. And I tell you why I think that's important. One, a 3-bedroom flat can solve three people's housing issue. Yeah, a 1-bedroom flat can only solve one person. You can never move a family into a 1-bedroom flat. You can move 3 individuals into a 3-bedroom flat. There is more utility in a bigger place. And unless the Mayor realises that, we are doomed, because family homes in London are becoming relatively more and more rare.
Okay. Tom.
Thank you. Yes, I'm Thomas Sowell. I'm the Assembly Member for Bexley and Bromley. On the family home point, I think that's a really important point, especially in outer London. I think a lot of people living outer London through its special character, and when delivering the homes, we've got to maintain it. But I think the important context to this is, and it comes back on what Sean was saying a moment ago, is one of the first things the Mayor did when he was elected in 2016 was downgrade the family homes in his London plan. He redefined the family home from a 3-bedroom home to a 2-bedroom home because he wanted to fudge the numbers of delivering more units without delivering the homes London actually needs. So I think that's the first thing we've got to do. We've got to get proper family homes back into the London plan. And secondly on that, we need to move away from quantity and move to quality in housing, because at the moment there's a far too big a drive on delivering a number of homes, a set number. So for example, where I live in Bromley, we've just had one of the John Lewis proposals for the Waitrose building. And again, what are they looking to put in that building? They're putting in studio flats, they're putting in 1-bed flats, they're putting in 2-bed flats. They're not putting in 3-bedroom flats so that families actually need to live in. And that's really, again, what we need is actual proper housing targets for how many 3-bed homes, how many 4-bed homes, how many 1-bed flats, how many 2-beds they're allowed to build, rather than just having a flat number of you need to deliver 1,000 homes a year, when, again, what you're going to do is you're just encouraging tower blocks, you're encouraging low quality housing with this blunt target.
Alex.
Thank you. I'm Alex George. I'm the new baby of the group, and that's not an age comment, Sean. So, look, Sadiq Khan is an arrogant little man with little to be arrogant about, and I emphasise the little. But the key thing to note about him, he always dismisses when Labour councils do something wrong. He always dismisses the fact that they are building unaffordable homes, they are building family homes. And I think, Nicole, the one thing that we need to recognise that the previous government did not get right, they did not change the NPPF and make sure that councils are forced to build family homes. It wasn't an option. Because I guarantee, you're from Barnet, you go to a Barnet Planning Committee meeting for a monstrosity of a tower block, and they will say, oh yes, we recognise we need new family homes. But going back to what colleagues said, it's about units, not the people that are going to live in them. And that's why we've had a massive drive out of London of young families to the point where we are now shutting down primary schools. Claire, to your point about key worker accommodation, once again, Khan doesn't look to his own councils where they're creating rich door, poor door schemes. They will say all the affordable, all the people that are less well off, let's put them in the back of those blocks, and all the richy riches, let's put them at the front with the nice maintenance schemes. And what that comes back to on key worker accommodation is that by doing that, you are disenfranchising a whole group of people. And also in the affordable bits of it, they are not truly affordable. Find me a nurse or a police officer or a fireman that can afford in some parts of London £2,000 a month in rent in a one-bedroom flat, in particular in the West End. So once again, it's become a numbers game, not an affordability game. So I completely agree with you there.
Thank you. We've got, I'm not saying I've scheduled this tightly, but we've got 2 more minutes before I due to move on to the next section. We have 2 questions. So if we can get 2 quick questions and a couple of quick answers.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Oliver Cooper, I was the leader on Camden Council. I've now emigrated to be the leader of the Conservatives on the Three Rivers in Hertfordshire. I completely agree with the fact national change needs to be done in changing the housing delivery test, in changing the way the new homes bonus works to reward family homes. But the other thing that local councils, particularly London Labour councils, are doing is they are ousting things like first homes, they are ousting affordable homes for ownership. Doesn't need to be just first homes as a product, but they are using that power. Both Labour in Camden and now my Liberal Democrat run council where I am have been ousting that because they are ideologically committed to stopping people from owning their own homes as a life choice, which should be everyone's life choice if they can make it. So what can we do as a London Assembly group, or national government, when we get back into government, to make sure that home ownership affordability is actually prioritised through those local plans and London plan as well?
Okay, and last question on this.
Thank you. Brett, Builders Merchants Federation, so I declare an interest. A week ago I'm in Liverpool at another meeting of Labour YIMBY, yes, in my backyard. They're noisy, they're shouty, they've got support, they've got institutional investors, they've got Labour MPs, many of the new intake are under 30. Question, I don't see a Conservative Party response. If you want to win, how are you trying to show the young voters of London and elsewhere that getting them a home is important to your party? Thank you.
Thanks. Let me just say before I go to the panel, so we had an event a bit like this with the 4 London Assembly group leaders, so me, the Labour leader, Lib Dem and Green, and plus Andrew there in his completely neutral capacity as Assembly Chair. This was last week, and this was for all the members of staff at the GLA, similar format to this. Some of the questions were a bit different. One of the questions was at the end, what is the priority for London? And actually Andrew and I both said housing, to your point. None of the 3 other party group leaders said housing. They said 3 different things. So on that bombshell, who would like to take those last couple of questions?
Let me quickly go. Let me talk about ownership. Ownership is where, for me, housing becomes political. We want people to own. People want to own. It's a point that the Conservatives are going to have to make. We oftentimes, from a campaigning point of view, from an election messaging point of view, we end up fighting the election that they want us to fight, when actually we should be talking about what we want to talk about. Conservatism often doesn't make sense unless you own capital. So if you're a young person in this country, you don't think you're ever going to own any capital, so what are you going to do with conservatism? So when I say to you that I have a passion for providing people the opportunity to own, the words can't measure it, but right here, right now in London, my personal focus is on social homes and key worker homes. I'm in the middle of setting up something with my friends to deliver those things into the market, because I believe we need to demonstrate that we are caring for the people at the very bottom of the ladder as well. Not only, as well. I really want to make that point, as well. That, for me, it's very important.
Okay. Anybody else on those? In terms of volume, in terms of volume and objections to housing, I think one of the challenges is that people often worry that new housing is going to be ugly, cramped, poorly built, and flammable. And it's no joke. And the reason people think that is because it's not an imaginary objection that they have. And so I think my challenge to the people who want to see more housing built, which includes myself, and you've heard includes some of my wonderful colleagues, is that simply denigrating people who object or have concerns, it's not a problem that can simply be dismissed. If you come up with a political solution to a problem which somehow doesn't take account of what people out there think and how they might vote in elections, then you're not really solving a political problem. You're just, operating in a sort of think tank space devoid of reality. So lots of the reasons why people object to housing are completely valid reasons. And I think if we are to generate more supply in order to bring down prices, then we have to be realistic about.
Neil, can I just say one thing as well? We have to approach this problem with more imagination. Let's be very clear. The Labour response is no response because they don't believe in private money. There is no version of events where we solve this problem in or outside of London without a bucket load of private money. And what that's going to mean is a much more imaginative response to the challenges that we face, a much greater mix of housing tenures and types, and the ability and the transmitted desire for people to move around slightly. We can't all live with our mothers and our grandparents. At some point, you may have to move away. And I come from a very poor working class community, and that community has been destroyed with the myth that we can all live together. When I watch all my middle class friends move to lovely places where we're all meant to live where we were born, and that's just physically impossible. And I think we need to stop that mantra and let people know you can move places, set up new communities and thrive.
Yeah. Okay. I was going to finish my comment by saying that I think, therefore, if we can find the kinds of housing, gentle density is something I've argued for, you actually find there's fewer objections and therefore more likely to actually get things built and get the supply we need. But we're 3 minutes behind my schedule. So that brings us to Susan, who I'm sure needs no introduction, who is going to move us on to our next section talking about safety and crime.
Thank you, and my name is Susan Hall, and I'm a recovering mayoral candidate. And it would be very wrong of me not to say thank you to so many people I recognise in this room that really helped. It would also be wrong of me not to actually say something about the media. I have to tell you, although Tim Donovan and Simon Harris have been harsh at times, I deserved it. But they were always very fair, and we should acknowledge that. We're very lucky in Harrow. Those two gentlemen in London, those two gentlemen look after us very well. Now, those of you that paid attention to the mayoral campaign know my absolute passion in life is policing, and we are in a terrible state in London, and you all know that. We've got knife crime at record high. Gun crime is up by 20%. Business robbery is up by 74%, and that makes a hell of a difference to people trying to run businesses. Recruitment is down. In fact, the Metropolitan Police is the only police force in the country where recruitment is down. And in fact, the mayor had to give money back to our government because he couldn't recruit enough. Now, when you ask the mayor, or when we talk to the mayor says it's all going in the right direction, everything's fine. It isn't fine. And whilst last week there was lots of talk about certain prime ministers having new clothes, I'm a little bit envious to be honest, but new clothes, new glasses, everything else. There was a very important speech made in London by Sir Mark Rowley, and he was telling us that 1/3 of his officers have given back their tasers. That's very serious. More than 1/4 of his officers had given up their firearms. This is terribly serious. This really is, all the while he cannot actually manage to recruit. Something has to be done in London. As you know, when I was standing for mayor, I was saying loud and clear, the BCU, the basic command units, do not work. We need to go back to borough policing. Those of you that are nodding, I suspect, are councillors. We know that when we had our borough commanders, we had access to police. At the moment, we don't have access. We don't know what's going on. And I'm telling you now, as I say, the most important speech, in my view, the week before last was Sir Mark Growley. We have got to pay attention. More and more people are dying on our streets. More and more kids are getting stabbed. It's more and more acceptable, it would appear, to carry knives. We have got to be part of the solution here. We really do. I've got lots of different ideas, as you will have known, watching through the mayoral campaign. But we are in a very serious situation in London, and we're on a slippery slope, and it's going downwards, I'm afraid.
Thank you, Susan. Any questions on, I see a lady over there and a lady down here, on policing and crime? Just scanning for a possible third person. Yes.
Thank you. Thanks to all the Assembly members. Many of you already know. My question is, it's more of a plea, actually. If you, one other thing you can possibly hammer the mayor on, and that's community-based policing, an OWL. I'm not sure if you're aware yet, but we've just been told very recently that the OWL scheme is going to be ending as soon as 31st of October, and with no replacement for possibly 9 months. In my neck of the woods in Hillingdon, we have the largest uptake of residents who participate in OWL. I think the percentage of 38% of all residents sign up in one way or another, far higher than some other numbers. And people are going to be outraged. They already feel unsafe. They already feel unsafe, and it's already hard enough to deal with how unsafe they're feeling. So, you know, the removal of OWL on top of that, and the way for them to speak to community officers, as they often do, is going to be quite disastrous. So if you could just please press the mayor at your next possible opportunity as to when we can possibly get a replacement for OWL as soon as possible, and if the members who currently sign up with OWL can be transferred over to the new scheme, because that will just make things a bit easier.
Great.
Thank you.
In my experience, Susan needs no encouragement to have a go at the mayor. Just 1 second. The other question over there.
I'm Sue Towner at Kingston and Surbiton Association. I understand that the mayor has stopped the police recruits, not the recruits, I beg your pardon, the
cadets.
Yeah, and they're stopping a route to youngsters being interested in taking a career with the Met. How do you feel about this?
Two really good questions. Okay, so
Shall I answer?
Susan, yeah, if you go first.
Okay, actually I spoke to a very senior person at MOPAC on Friday about the OWL system. The problem is apparently other police forces are not taking it up, so therefore it's not financially viable. I know the amount of work that goes on in Hillingdon with OWL is unbelievable. And I said in my introduction, we all need to be part of the solution, and we do. And the number of volunteers that really put some work into the whole OWL system and informing residents on what's going on, it is a great pity. I've already started that conversation, and I will be pushing on it. I have fought for OWL to be kept, as you, I suspect, know, throughout the last 3 or 4 years. So I'm on the case on that already. As for the lady over there, what do I think about it? I'm sure you know what I think about it. It's absolutely outrageous. If we want to get kids off the streets, if we want to get kids to understand that police officers are normal human beings, they can interact really well with kids that might go slightly off the rails. It's also a very good way of getting kids to realise that it's a good career opportunity. And given the situation we're in now, where we cannot recruit, it's mindless. This mayor has got a £21 billion budget, and yet he spends money doing all sorts of other things. And I would say keeping Londoners safe should be his #1 priority, and actually putting things like cadets into place is absolutely vital. So you can imagine exactly how I feel about that, and it has been brought up by both Emma and Sean at Mayor's Question Time.
I'm currently.
Oh, sorry. We have a queuing system. Emma.
Oh, sorry.
I'm Emma. So nice to meet those of you that I haven't. I'm Emma Best, Assembly member, and one of those things that I do on the Assembly is sitting on the police committee, and I think actually both those questions are really linked, because when you look at a Met police force that has a plummeting confidence rate, you're talking about two schemes that grow that community confidence in the police that we risk losing all at once. This seems the complete opposite of anything you would need to do to just maintain the level of confidence we have now, let alone watch it plummet even further. So I think, and particularly I just wanted to come back on the cadet point, because it's something I've raised and it's close to my heart, because I think it's the best way in which young and a diverse number of young people get to be involved with the police, and like I think Susan said, see them in a different light, see them as humans that do care about their community, like all of us, and just want things to go well for the community and to see people thrive. And it also plays not only into the confidence in the police, but the recruitment. And when, as we've said, we are the only constabulary in the UK which didn't meet its recruitment targets, why are we cutting off supply to one of the best recruitment links that we possibly have with a really diverse number of young people? But the answer that the Mayor's team have to this, when I questioned the Deputy Mayor on why our recruitment hadn't gone well, was because we had too many helicopters in the recruitment video last time. So don't worry, they've solved that. We're not going to have helicopters in the next Met recruitment videos, so apparently everything should be fine now.
Just quickly, my two colleagues have covered it. I am honorary colonel for the Royal Regiment of Fusiliers, and one of my big jobs is cadets. I'm currently chair of a thing called the Cadet Health Check Team, but that's uniformed Army, Navy, Air Force cadets. I've approached the police to understand what their problem is. I'm now about to approach the Mayor to tell him he should just pay up. The officers involved are very passionate about cadets and want to keep it going, but it is a financial situation. It is a pittance, as far as I can see, and the Mayor can do it. So let's have that conversation with the Mayor, and he needs to make a decision.
Thanks, Sean. Tom.
Thank you. I think on community policing, the big thing we've got to remember was that this Mayor has completely devastated the network of community bases across London. He shut somewhere in the region of half of them. And at the heart of the new Met for London plan, because what really breaks my heart about the state of policing in London at the moment is that the Met Commissioner, Sir Mark Rowley, has a plan to fix this. He knows what to do to fix this, but he needs the cash from the Mayor. And instead of giving him that cash, the Mayor chose to spend it on pre-election gimmicks this year. And that's what really upsets me about the state of policing, that we could be making progress with this. But at the heart of that plan is new bases, is making sure that officers, the safer neighbourhood teams that do so much across our capital, is making sure that they're no more than 20 minutes outside of the neighbourhoods they serve, making sure that neighbourhood police remain in the neighbourhoods they serve. Because in my ward, as well as being Assembly member, I'm also a councillor in Bromley. So my ward of Hayes and Coney Hall, which is a semi-rural ward, because we have all sorts of... I have a chicken farm in my ward, so that's how rural it is. And it's... But at my ward of Hayes and Coney Hall, my safer neighbourhood team have to wait for the bus. And the bus service in my ward is not great. My officers, trying to keep my residents safe, are spending more time waiting for the bus than they are on the beat. And when we asked MOPAC for a vehicle so they could at least drive themselves to the ward, we got told no, they've got a bus, but they don't have a bus. That's the point. And that's what really breaks my heart. But we've also got to look at how we can improve infrastructure. Our railway network is being used as an accessory to crime at the moment. My ward, again, Hayes Station in my ward, the fourth highest priority network, the fourth highest priority station for ticket barriers, because people are coming up the Mid-Kent line, they're robbing the shops, they're getting back on the train and making off with their goods. And we know they're doing that. The police know they're doing that. South Eastern know they're doing it. That's why it's the fourth highest for a ticket barrier. The government will not give the money for the ticket barrier. And these are small infrastructure changes that will help cut crime in our communities and help people have faith back in the police. So that's what we need, more police bases and improving our infrastructure.
Absolutely. Just on the point about funding, by the way, I think this Mayor, just to emphasise this, so the Mayor found between December, when he publishes his first budget, and February this year, when he publishes his final budget, £630 million of extra money, unallocated money, which he could spend how he likes. This was all of his election pledges. For the first time ever, the Metropolitan Police Commissioner submitted two budgets. Budget A, doing the new Met for London plan, Budget B, not doing the new Met for London plan, and the difference was £72 million. And out of the £630 million that was unallocated that the Mayor could choose to spend on anything that he wanted, none of it went to fund the new Met for London plan, which is effectively the job that the new commissioner has been hired to do. So when you hear Sadiq talking about the wonderful work that he's doing with the new Met commissioner, understand that he's cut him off at the knees by refusing to fund the programme that he put together to solve exactly these problems. Sorry, rant over. Do you have any more questions? We've got a couple more minutes before we have to move on. Is that a question at the back? And do I see another question? Let's take the question at the back.
Right. First, Sakim Musoe, former Police and Crime Commissioner. What I will say to you in terms of the police cadets, it is actually an amazing pathway for many to become police officers. So when they turn 18, they leave the cadets, they become special constables, and they become a regular. So I was quite astonished by that decision. One thing that we've not spoken about, and perhaps on one of those panels that the police don't turn up to, which they should be coming to, in my opinion, is the issue of retention. Yeah. One of the biggest problems facing policing overall, and especially the Met, is not just the issue of recruitment, even though, like you quite rightly said, the Met has never been able to meet its target. I'm proud that I actually exceeded all of my targets for 3 years as police commissioner. And Sadiq never asked me once how I was able to do that. But anyway, is the issue of retention. What I suggest you might want to ask the mayor at the next time is this: what is the cost to taxpayers in London every time a police officer leaves in the first or second year during their probationary period? And secondly, what is the cost of any officer leaving the Met after they pass their probation? Because if you can reduce that by even 1 or 2%, that is a cash saving for policing. I managed to do that, and it was never been asked before. The answer I got when I first asked that question of a chief constable was, oh, well, we don't really know how we can get that data. But they did. And they found that if an officer left my force in the first year or two, it cost over £100,000 per officer. If they left in the second year, once they're out of probation, it was about 70 grand. I was able to reduce attrition rates by about 2%. So I was one of the few force areas in the country that actually saw an increase in officer retention. I think the numbers would be astonishing if you got a chance to actually get those figures from the Met and the Mayor as well, you'll find.
That's extraordinary. We're about a minute over, and Andrew, Susan, and Alex all want to say something short.
Look, to go back to the point Claire made earlier, retention is not just about salary or progression, it's about accommodation as well. I was born in a police house, a home that was lent by the local authority because they wanted police officers to be on the estate. That scheme no longer works. And most Metropolitan Police officers now live not even in the suburbs, they live out of London. And that journey is a disincentive to retention. And may I say, Festus, you are a prime example of how a national swing loses us an enormous amount of talent. And you are an amazing police and crime. And I hope we'll reverse that as soon as we possibly can.
Alex, absolutely. Alex.
I was just going to say, Festus, I'd ask this room a question. Who in their right mind would want to be a police officer in London at the moment when you have a mayor that does not defend you, a Labour Party that looks down on you, and left-wing groups that are whipping up hysteria, accusing every officer of everything under the sun? And so that's part of the reason why we have a recruitment problem. Because, I meet young officers as leader of the opposition in Enfield Council, as a war councillor. I meet them, I speak to them. And, obviously they're not allowed to say things, but when you go around London and you meet people, parents of police officers, I'm worried about what this mayor is saying about the police. I'm worried about, the fact that you've got a few bad officers, as exposed in the Casey review, doing despicable things. That does not mean all of them are bad. We should be proud of our police officers. But under this mayor, I'm afraid to say, I would not encourage my children to become police officers whilst he is Mayor of London.
And last word to Susan.
I'll be very brief and follow up from what Alex has said. This speech that I was talking about last time, 18 officers a day are abused, either spat at, attacked, or racially abused. 2 per week are seriously injured, and that's in the Metropolitan Police. So Alex is right, we need to protect our officers. They are now, an awful lot of two-tier policing is being thrown at them. They're not getting proper direction. They're not being supported by our mayor. And this is leading to all sorts of problems. The cost of retention, obviously, if we don't retain properly, is vast. We all know that, and they should look that up. But it's a far bigger problem than that. Far, far bigger.
Absolutely. Thank you, Susan, finishing off our police and crime section. Sorry, we have to move on. We're a couple of minutes over. I want to leave time, because you have to leave here by, I don't know what happens at past, but that's when our time is up. So I assume people sweep in and throw us out. But for now, we have our final section on getting around London, keeping London moving, with Tom Turrell.
Well, thank you all for coming to this event. For anyone that's had to sit through one of my various unsuccessful selection attempts, you've probably heard me talk a lot about buses before, so I'm going to try not talk too much about buses today. But I want you to cast your minds back, for people in the room who are old enough like me, to remember when Boris was mayor and his record on transport. Because actually what we had with Boris as mayor was an ambitious mayor who realised that cities are built on their transport networks, and you need a working transport network for those cities to thrive. Unfortunately, Sadiq Khan comes across as he could not be less interested in transport, less interested in a working transport system for our city. And that comes across in his complete lack of ambition. And that is really encapsulated in the Superloop. The Superloop has been good for outer London in connecting some of these places up, but it's completely missed the point of what it's meant to be achieving. I mentioned in my earlier part about the fact that I represent a semi-rural seat. And there are rural communities like Biggin Hill in my constituency that have one road in and one road out. There's Orpington that has very little bus services, again, surrounded by fields and countryside. Yet the Superloop goes nowhere near these towns. The people hit hardest by ULEZ, and he introduced Superloop because he said that was how he was going to counter some of the criticism of ULEZ. He does not touch the communities hardest hit by it. And all the travel projects delayed under him. The 358, this is the 358 bus in Bromley. This is going to be an all-electric bus. It's going to be powered either end. It's a complete piece of innovation. It's nearly 2 years late, and we still can't understand why. It seems to be that TfL didn't quite understand some land ownership. That seems to be what we're getting, but the mayor and his team are quite secretive when we ask him. We all know Crossrail. It was on time and on budget under Boris, handed over to Sadiq Khan, and it's nearly 2 years late and millions of pounds over. The Central Line, new equipment not coming in. Those trains are not working. They are basically cannibalising themselves at the moment. The Bakerloo Line extension is all but dead because the mayor has not built the case for it. So, and then we've got the war on motorists. Because when you talk to Sadiq Khan about why all his transport projects are falling apart, he'll tell you that he needs more money from central government because he won't do what needs to be done in terms of fares, because he'd rather play political games with the financing of TfL than actually fund these projects. But when it comes to the Blackwall and Silvertown Tunnel, he subscribes to the ideas that those using the infrastructure should pay for it. But he doesn't apply, he's happy to wage those levies on drivers, but he's not happy to do the same with transport upgrades. And only a couple of weeks ago, I asked him in his commission about the Rotherhithe Tunnel. I said, are you going to introduce tolls on the Rotherhithe Tunnel? And his commissioner turned around and said, no, we have no plans to. And I'd like to remind you, he had no plans to extend ULEZ either. But then his commissioner took a breath and listed 3 or 4 reasons in which tolls at Rotherhithe could then be introduced. And that's the problem here, is once again, we're seeing a 2-tier model to how we fund our transport infrastructure upgrades. We desperately need these upgrades, and we need the mayor to get a grip on these upgrades. So I know my subject is keeping London moving. The problem is that the current mayor is not keeping London moving.
Thanks, Tom. So do we have any questions on transport? It's not usually a popular topic. Here we go, right. 2 people, in fact, over at the far side there.
Yeah, sorry, it's not a question on transport, but you did say
I did say yep.
The title of this meeting is How Does the Next Conservative Leader Return Our Capital to Glory? And so I guess I would ask you, do you think it matters who's going to be the next leader of the Conservative Party for London? And if it does, are you guys going to come up with a view as to who it should be, and are you going to communicate that view publicly?
Good question. I'm sure that will not in any way divide opinion. Yes. Yes.
Harry Todd, I'm the campaign manager for Lambeth and Southwark. It's really good that you mentioned buses rather than the tube, because I'm tired of people talking about the tube, when in South London, where I am, it's east-west bus service that's really important. How can we do more to improve that east-west connectivity? Because right now, it takes me a good hour and a half to get from West London to East London on the because I've got to go in and then out again. It's so much easier if we just get that east-west done properly.
South London, massive. Represent. Absolutely with you. What is the tube? We have that nowhere near my constituency. So who would like to tackle either of those? Sean.
On this thing about leadership, of course it matters who's the leader of the party, but we, all individuals here, are also members of the party, so we'll all individually have our opinion. It's not for Neil or the group to tell us what opinion to have. I don't know if you've met any of us. That would be very hard to enforce. Indeed. I will just say this. The candidates we have good candidates, have a good spread of people. So please don't go around saying only the person you like can do the job. I think a number of them can do the job. I just imagine this was a Labour Party. Which one of that bunch would you pick to replace Starmer? Exactly. We are lucky. We have talent. I have a personal view, and I'll tell you that view afterwards. I don't think it's right to espouse it from the stage. Unless they all do it, then I'll get into it. but the point being this: whoever wins, it's our opportunity to come together and answer the questions that the public want answered. If you've noticed from this dais, this stage, we're trying to be positive and give answers to the challenges, not score cheap political points. Because that's how we got into the mess we're in. What we want to do is demonstrate to the public that the Conservative view of the world can deliver.
Emma, and then I've seen Andrew.
Thanks. I think we're actually really blessed with the leadership candidates we have. I just start off by saying I might actually vote in this leadership election, so that's a good starting point. And it's just worth remembering that two of those leadership candidates were once London Assembly members, so I'm not saying they're the best ones, but we certainly know they come from good pedigree. And just moving on, I think, onto the second question around the bus. And I think this is where I wanted to talk about Superloop, because I, for one, thought, what a great idea. Even if it is coming from Sadiq Khan, this might be his actual hitting the gold. And then I found out the Superloop wasn't actually a super loop for those of us in outer London that were completely missed out of it. But it's that orbital bus service and the lines as well, linking up with those counties out in Oliver's neck of the woods, and actually trying to connect London outside, that's really important. So when Sadiq Khan talks about adding bus miles, what you actually find when you look at it is we've lost a significant amount of bus miles, and they've actually been lost in some of those key areas, in those more quiet suburban areas, where we're now told to get out the drive and, I don't know, walk 3 miles to the local hospital, because that is the only option people have but to drive. And it's really those orbital routes that we need to tackle.
Absolutely. And let me just also add the word trams into the discussion. We have them in Croydon. They are a lovely, wonderful thing, but they are reaching the end of their life, and they are another thing that needs some money spending on them to keep them running in the happy way that we are enjoying currently. I see a person at the front and a person at the back there. There we are. We've got 2 mic people on their way.
How do we stop the increase in street clutter we keep getting? Particularly things like lime bikes, which seem to just occupy space, unlike the scheme where we have rental bikes by the mayor. They're just everywhere, and they get in the way, and then they got cyclists on the pavements. Surely there's stats about people getting injured, and it just seems to be uncontrolled, and it's making London ugly.
Good question. And at the back?
The mayor keeps setting targets. The mayor keeps setting some targets, but there are no reasons to meet them. As an EV driver myself, what incentives are there now in London for electric vehicle drivers? Firstly, soon there are going to be no benefits, as the congestion zone is going to come back for EV drivers, and Westminster parking charges have gone up by 10 times in some areas. He's trying to meet his environmental targets. That's a different conversation, but what incentives are there for EV drivers? Because there doesn't seem any anymore.
Good question. Yeah, I've met some EV people who are having a bit of EV regret, actually, lately. Andrew, who I unaccountably missed on the previous question, and then let's see who else wants to chip in.
Well, on lime bikes, it's frustrating because the technology is there to be able to enforce not docking stations as such, but recommended place where you could put bikes. And it's frustrating because I like the freedom of line bikes. I like e-scooters, but we're not negotiating, local authorities and the mayor are not negotiating heavily enough with the providers to make sure that people park those responsibly. And more work needs to be done, because otherwise we're going to end up like Paris, where they banned e-scooters, and various places where the bikes as well are being considered. We're going to ban. Instead, I was never great fun of Boris bikes on the basis that it cost us a fortune to provide us them every year, and it still does, hundreds of millions of pounds to date to provide Boris bikes. It was a great innovation, but it should have been privatised, and the taxpayer shouldn't have had to pay for them. But at the moment they do. Just to show the diversity of view on this assembly and how we managed to stay a united group with differing views. I don't think it matters who's the leader of the Conservative Party, quite frankly. I never wanted to vote for the leader of the Conservative Party anyway. However, I won't be bothering voting for any of them unless one of them comes forward and promises an elected chair of the Conservative Party. That candidate, and I don't care which one it is, if they promise that, I'll vote for them.
On that bombshell. Emma.
Just to come back to the point on the e-bikes and e-scooters, it's not just ugly, it's downright dangerous, and there's a significant amount of blind people and disabled people that are scared now to go out in London and they don't feel safe. It's not just the dockless bikes, it's also things like floating bus stops. And this is a situation you wouldn't think we'd be in at this state. We're actually in the capital city, in one of the biggest global cities. We're going backwards in terms of accessibility. I'm meeting more and more people that feel that they can access their city less than they could 10 years ago. That's a really heartbreaking statistic. And all this against the backdrop as well of people being told not to drive, but they're also having their public transport taken away from them. They're also feeling like they can't even walk to the shops. But what I'd come back to on the e-bikes and e-scooters is it does need national leadership, and I wouldn't like to get Sadiq Khan out of this, so I would say it also needs a strong mayor that's going to push that. But it's a bit like the pedicabs, which we've recently had in Westminster, where you see that the actual private companies delivering these schemes, they want more regulation, they want more input telling them what to do and how to make it safe, so everybody's playing under the same rules. Then you see the residents, they want more regulation, the users want more regulation, so it needs some political will to actually get regulation, because everybody wants to see that happen. But I would say once you have that regulation, it needs somebody to actually want to put it in, because with the pedicabs in Westminster, that's now been done with a lot of hard work from Conservatives and people like Nikki Aiken, and the mayor is now sitting on that and not inputting that for the people of Westminster. So it needs that regulation and national leadership, but it also needs a mayor that's going to implement it at the end of the day as well.
Absolutely. Alex.
You can tell who's a Westminster. Whenever someone says pedicabs, their ears prick up. Paul Swaddle at the back as leader of Westminster, I've never seen him so excited. With regard to the leadership, I agree with what my colleagues have said, but my wife is the person with the best judge of character in the world. And so, Anna Member, whoever she tells me to vote for, that's where I'm going with. Now, with regard to EVs, Nigel, so I have an EV. And the problem in London, as with the rest of the country, there is now no taxable benefit to having an EV. And what people haven't woken up to yet is there are extremely heavy vehicles. And I think Susan raised it during the mayoral campaign with regard to funding for TfL-owned roads. And they are going to, if there are more of them on the road, it will cause more issues unless there is further funding into resurfacing roads. But, and actually my good friend Henry Higgins, from our Ealing and Hillingdon candidate for the GLA, one of the things he pointed out in Ealing and Hillingdon, the grid can't handle the homes that they have there at the moment. So therefore you cannot have a rapid expansion of EVs. And a funny point, I love this statistic, is the wokest of Labour councils in London have the poorest record on putting in EV chargers across London. So for all of their climate emergency declarations, they're the worst performers. So always, if those of you that are from Camden, David, always throw that one at them. They'll love it.
Susan.
Right, I can't let that gentleman's question go without answering. It genuinely doesn't matter who we all decide to have as a leader. The most important thing is that every single one of us get behind that person and are loyal to that person. Because I can tell you all, it isn't easy putting yourself up for election. It isn't easy having lots of things thrown at you. And it's even worse when your own colleagues then, thankfully not many of them, but then put the knife in. And that has got to stop. Because we're all in this wonderful party. None of us want to go to a different party. We want to make sure we're supportive of whoever gets elected. And whoever gets elected, I will support 100%.
Absolutely. Tom, I think the last person on.
Thank you.
Wait,
Yeah,
and Sean.
On the point of the leadership, I think it really is, especially here in London, it's just having a positive vision for our capital and the people that make it up. I think we touched upon in housing. Renters are now becoming a really significant demographic here in London, and quite frankly, we haven't done enough to talk to that demographic historically. So we need a real positive vision, especially for renters. Line bikes. I think really at the heart of it, we need to make sure that we give councils or TfL, whoever, the power to fine line bike for discarded bikes, and also give the police the power to confiscate them when they're left in careless places, because line bike are not going to take this seriously until their assets start disappearing off the streets. So until that's really what we need to look at, is proper enforcement of how we do that. And in regards to electric vehicles, I think it comes back to what I said in my opening remarks about ambition and innovation. Wandsworth Council, when it was under Conservative control, was converting lampposts into electric charging points. Again, something innovative to actually think outside the box on how we can provide these extra the infrastructure to support the move to greener travel.
Thanks. Sean?
I just want to just posit something on EVs. We need to be careful with subsidies, because you're asking the poorest people to subsidise the richest people to buy fancy cars. And I think you need to take that into account. You know, there's a lot of Londoners who have to have a car, who scrape a car, and you can ask that person for you to buy your EV or have your EV be cheaper to run. EVs need to stand on their own two legs, is my opinion, as soon as possible, because there's a lot of people who don't have that choice, but we're still making them pay for that choice.
Fair enough. Let me just add my own thought on the line bike. It's basically the same problem as cars, which is to say, if you've got an area that's quite sparsely populated and there's a few just parking here and there, it works fine. Where you have a lot of people, like in the middle of a city, all trying to park in the same place, you need to give the Highways Authority, the borough or the TfL, the power to impose a fine that is big enough to make people not want to park there. And I think that's pretty obviously the solution. So the government needs to legislate to give boroughs that power, and I would assume then Line Bike and the others would pass that fine on to their users, who would quite rapidly stop parking them the way that they do if it cost them 120 quid rather than about 3 quid. That seems to me the obvious way to solve that. But I see some hands going up, but I also see that it is half past. So I'm going to have to draw a line under it. So can I thank all of you for coming, particularly all of you for questions, and all of you who did not get your question asked. Thank you very much. Can I thank Conservative Home for supporting our event. There's some teas and coffees at the back. The table doesn't seem to have been raided very heavily at all. So way out. Let me say a special thank you to the lovely Peter, who joins us today, former Assembly member and scourge of Sadiq. Thank you, Peter. Only because he'll be embarrassed. Let me just...
And to thank the research team that we have backing us up at City Hall for organising this and advising us, providing briefing notes that make us look like we know what we're talking about.
Absolutely. Well, and in the final thing, they have also worked on these lovely leaflets on your desks, so you can, when you leave this room, you can remember us. And you've got links to all of our socials, so you can continue to see the work that we do. So thank you to all of you. Thank you to, I'm sure, millions at home watching. And in particular, thank you to our excellent panel. Thanks, everyone.